Hello everyone, today we would like to present about chapter 19, which we're talking about global HR management with us, Aretha, Zea, Pramudito, Jojo, and also me, Diva. The first one, we're going to talk about to summarize the strategic role of human resources management in the international business. As shown in the figure 19.1, people are the linchpin of the firm's organization architecture. That the firms to outperform its rivals in the global marketplace, it must have the right people in the right postings. Those people must be trained appropriately so that they have the skill that's required to perform of their job effectively. And so that they behave in a manner that is congruent with the desire of the culture of the firm. Their compensations packages must create the incentive for them to take actions that are consistent with the strategy of the firm. And the performance appraisals system the firm uses must measure the behavior that the firms want to encourage. Therefore, the HRM functions itself through its staffing, training, compensations, and performance appraisals activities has a critical impact upon the people, culture, incentive, and control system elements of the firm's organization's architecture. Those HRM professionals have a critically important strategic role that it is incumbent upon them to shape these elements for a firm's organization architecture in a manner that is consistent with the strategy of the enterprise so that the firm can effectively implement its strategy. Let's talking about the pro and cons of different approaches to staffing policy in the international business. The advantage and the disadvantage of the three approaches to staffing policy are summarized in this table. Broadly speaking, an ecocentric approach is compatible with an international strategy. A polycentric approach is compatible with the localization strategy, and geocentric approach is compatible with both global standardization and also transnational strategies. While the staffing policies described here are well known and widely used among both practitioners and scholars of international businesses, some critics have claimed that the typology is too simplistic and that is obscure the internal differentiations of management practices within international businesses. The critics claims that within some international businesses, staffing policy varies significantly from national subsidiary to national subsidiary, while some are managed on an ecocentric basis, others the managed of polycentric or geocentric manner. Other critics note that the staffing policy adopted by a firm primarily driven by its geocentric scope. As opposed of its strategic orientations, firms have a broad geographic scope that are most likely to have geocentric mindset.
Hello everyone, my name is Aretha Imtinan S, and now I'll explain the part 3, which is the manager's failure. Okay, so the expatriates are citizens of one country who are working in another country, while impatriates, we call it to identify a subset of expatriates who are citizens of a foreign country working in a home country of their multinational employer. Expatriate failure is a prominent issue in the international staffing literature, which is the premature return of an expatriate manager to his or her home country. The costs of expatriate failure are high, so one estimates is that the average cost per failure to the parent firm can be as high as 3 times the expatriate's annual domestic salary plus the cost of relocations. The next one here, we have the expatriate failure rate. The study of Alta shows that the expatriate failure rate in US, European, and Japanese multinational and Tang found out that the US multinational experience a much higher expatriate failure rate than either European or Japanese multinationals. We can see here there are several reasons for expatriate failure. In the US, the reason are inability of supposed to adjust, manager inability to adjust, other family problems, manager personal maturity, inability to cope with responsibility. In Japanese, the reason are inability to cope with responsibility, difficulty with new environment, personal problem, lack of technical competence, and supposed inability to adjust. While in European, the common issue is supposed inability to adjust. We can see that the most striking difference between the list is the inability of supposed to adjust. It is the top reason in the US and Europe, but the number 5 in Japanese. It is because the Japanese society traditionally relegates the wife, and the fact the most Japanese expatriates managers are men. So the next one is expatriate selection. One way to reduce expatriate failure rates is by improving selection procedures to screen out inappropriate candidates. Mendenhall and Widodo state that a major problem in many firms is that IHRM managers tend to equate domestic performance with overseas performance potential. And they identified 4 dimensions that seem to predict success in a foreign posting, which is the first one, self-orientation, which strengthen the expatriate self-esteem, self-confidence, and mental well-being. And expatriate with those features are more likely to succeed in foreign postings and were able to adapt their interests. The next one is others orientation, which enhance the expatriates' ability to interact effectively with host country nationals. There are 2 factors seem to be particularly important here. The first one is the relationship development that refers to the ability to develop long-lasting friendship with the host country national. And the next one is the willingness to communicate that refers to expatriates' willingness to use the host country's language. The third one is perceptual ability. It is the ability to understand why people of other countries behave the way they do, or we can call it empathize. Expatriate managers who lack this ability tend to treat foreign nationals as if they were home country. And as a result, they may experience significant management problems and considerable frustrations. And the last one is cultural toughness. This dimension refers to the relationship between the country of assignment and how well an expatriate adjusts to a particular posting. Because some countries are much tougher posting than others because their cultures are more unfamiliar and uncomfortable. The next one is the global mindset. Researchers suggest that global mindset is the fundamental trait for expatriate managers, and Mendenhall and Widodo suggest that standard psychological tests and culture comparison can be used to assess the 4 dimensions, like I said before. But however, in practice, the Mendenhall and Widodo theories doesn't always conform with the reality. For example, like in Tang research, it shows that only 5% of the firms use the formal procedures and psychological tests to assess the personality traits and relational ability to potential expatriates. And research by international orientation resources suggests that only 90% of the employees were selected on the basis of their technical expertise or their skills, not their cross-cultural fluency to adapt with new environment in other countries. And the next slide will be explained by my other friend. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll proceed to training and management development. Okay, we have training for expatriate managers. The first one, we have cultural training. Cultural training seeks to foster an appreciation for the host country's culture. The belief is that understanding a host country's culture will help the manager empathize with the culture, which will enhance his or her effectiveness in dealing with host country nationals. Then we have language training. A willingness to communicate in the language of the host country, even if the expatriate is far from fluent, can help build rapport with local employees and improve the manager's effectiveness. Those firms that did offer foreign language training for the expatriates believe it improved their employees' effectiveness and enabled them to relate more easily to a foreign culture, which fostered a better image of the firm in the host country. The last one, we have practical training. It aimed at helping the expatriate manager and family ease themselves into day-to-day life in the host country as a useful source of support and information. Then we have repatriation of expatriates, a largely overlooked but critically important issue, and the training and development of expatriate manager is to prepare them to re-entry into their home country organization. So repatriation should be seen as the final link in an integrated circular process that connects good selection and cross-cultural training of managers with completion of their term abroad and reintegration into their national organization. The problem that might occur is re-entering employees have to scrounge for jobs, or firms will create standby positions that don't use the expatriate skills and capabilities and fail to make the most of the business investment the firm has made in that individual. And the key to solving this problem is good human resource planning to develop good selection and training programs for its expatriates. Also develop good programs for reintegrating expatriates back into work, for preparing them for changes in the landscape and utilizing knowledge. Okay, now we have management development and strategy. Management development programs are designed to increase the overall skill levels of managers through a mix of ongoing management education and rotations of managers through a number of jobs within the firm to give varied experiences. They are attempts to improve the overall productivity and quality of the firm's management resources. Management development programs help build a unifying corporate culture by socializing new managers into the norms and value systems of the firm. In-house company training programs and intense interaction during offsite training can foster a spirit for share experiences, informal networks, as well as develop technical competencies.
Now I'll be continuing the presentation with the fifth learning objective, which is about performance appraisal. This is important as managers' performance is usually evaluated using performance appraisal systems against a set of criteria that the company deems important for the implementation of strategy and achieving a competitive advantage. So when doing a performance appraisal against expatriates, evaluators might find a few different problems caused by an unintentional bias. Unintentional bias makes it difficult to assess expatriate managers' performance objectively. This occurs as expatriates are usually evaluated by the host nation and the home office managers. For example, the host nation managers may be biased by their own cultural frame of reference and expectations, where different countries have their own management styles, such as participative decision making, which in countries like India it isn't commonly practiced. So, the evaluations of home country managers might be the evaluation of home country managers may be biased by distance and their own lack of international experience. The managers in the home office are typically unaware of what is going on in a foreign operation. As a result, they tend to evaluate an expatriate's success based on hard data, such as the subunit's productivity, profitability, or market share. Whereas these parameters could just be the influence of factors outside the expatriate manager's control, such as adverse changes in exchange rates and economic downturn. These problems cause unfairness in reviewing an expatriate, and that is why most of them believe that this isn't helping their career development. For that reason, these guidelines should be followed in order to avoid those biases in performance appraisal. First, an on-site manager's appraisal should be given more weight than on an off-site manager's review. This is because an on-site manager is more likely to examine the soft variables that are crucial components of an expatriate's performance because of their familiarity. So to help further minimize bias, most experts recommend involving a former expatriate as well who serve in the same location and doing the reviewing process. Uh, and finally, if foreign on-site managers are required to perform prepare a performance assessment, home office management should be informed before a formal termination evaluation is completed. This allows the home office manager to temper what could otherwise be a harsh assessment based on a cultural misunderstanding. Now, on to the next learning objective, which is about compensation. Typically, every discussion of compensation methods in a multinational corporation raises two challenges. One concern is how compensation should be modified to account for changes in economic situations and compensation patterns across countries. Another point to consider is how expatriate managers should be compensated. For the uh, for the first problem of national differences in compensation, pose a confusing dilemma for an international corporation, whether executives in different countries should be paid according to local standards or should be equally paid globally. The issues does not emerge in companies that have ethnocentric or polycentric staffing policies. However, in companies with geocentric staffing policies, this issue is extremely real. This would mean that international managers should be paid the same amount in order to not to create resentment against those who receive higher pay, despite having the same responsibilities. That is why many companies have evolved toward a compensation system based on worldwide standards over the last 10 years. With this system, employees are evaluated by the same grading system and have access to the same bonus pay and benefit structure irrespective of where they work. So the component of the typical expatriate compensation package are base salary, foreign service premium, allowance of various types, tax differentials, and benefits. An expatriate's base salary is normally in the same range as the base salary for the similar position in the home country. The base salary is normally paid in either the home country currency or in the local currency. Next, foreign service premium is extra pay the expatriate receives for working outside his or her country of origin. It is offered as an inducement to accept foreign postings by giving on average 16% from the base salary. Next, for allowances, there are four types of allowances that are often included in an expatriate's compensation packages, which is hardship allowances, housing allowances, cost of living allowances, and education allowances. And Next, the fourth one, taxation. Unless a host country has a reciprocal tax treaty with this expatriate's home country, the expatriate might have to pay income tax to both the home and host country governments. And when a reciprocal tax treaty is not enforced, the firm typically pays the expatriates income tax in the host country. And finally, the last one, many firms also ensure that their expatriates receive the same level of medical and pension benefits abroad that they receive at home.
Hello, my name is Pramudito Harjo Widodo, and I'm going to continue this presentation. Now, moving on to the last learning objective of this chapter, which is to understand how organized labor can influence strategic choices in international business firms. Now we're going to talk about international labor relations. So the HRM function of international business is typically responsible for international labor relations. From a strategic perspective, the key issue in international labor relation is the degree to which organized labor can limit the choices of an international business. A firm's ability to integrate and consolidate its global operations to realize experience curve and location economies can be limited by organized labor, constraining the pursuit of a transnational or global standardization strategy. With this in mind, this section is divided into three parts. First, we review organized labor's concern about multinational enterprises. Second, we look at how organized labor has tried to deal with these concerns. And third, we look at how international businesses manage their labor relations to minimize labor disputes. So now we're going to talk about the concerns of organized labor. Labor unions generally try to get a better pay, greater job security, and better working conditions for their member through collective bargaining with management. Unions' bargaining power is derived largely from their ability to threaten to disrupt production, either by a strike or some other form of work protest. So a principal concern of domestic unions about multinational firm is that the company can counter its bargaining power with the power to move production to another country. Ford, for example, clearly threatened British unions with a plan to move manufacturing to continental Europe unless British workers abandoned work rules that limited productivity, showed restraint in negotiating for wage increases, and curtailed strikes and other work disruptions. And the second concern of organized labor is that an international business will keep highly skilled tasks in its home country and farm out only low-skilled tasks for foreign plants. Such a practice makes it relatively easy for an international business to switch production from one location to another, as economic conditions warrant. Consequently, the bargaining power of organized labor is once more reduced. And a final union concern arises when an international business attempts to import employment practices and contractual agreement from its home country. When these practices are alien to the host country, organized labor fears the change will reduce its influence and power. This concern has surfaced in response to Japanese multinationals that have been trying to export their style of labor relations to other countries. For example, much to the annoyance of the United Auto Workers or UAW, many Japanese auto plants in the United States are not unionized. As a result, union influence in the auto industry is declining. Now we're going to talk about the strategy of organized labor. So organized labor has responded to the increased bargaining power of multinational corporations by taking three action. First, they try to establish international labor organization. Secondly, they try to lobby for national legislation to restrict multinationals. And third, they try to achieve international regulations on multinational through such organizations as the United Nations. But so far, these efforts have not been very successful. For example, in the 1960s, organized labor began to establish international trade secretariats, or ITS, to provide worldwide links for national unions in particular industries. The long-term goal was to be able to bargain transnationally with multinational firms. Organized labor believed that by coordinating union action across countries through an ITS, it could counter the power of multinational corporations by threatening to disrupt production or on an international scale. For example, Ford's threat to move production from Great Britain to other European locations would not have been credible if the unions in various European countries had united to oppose it. However, the ITS have had virtually no real success. Although national unions may want to cooperate, they also compete with each other to attract investment from international businesses and hence jobs for their members. So now moving on to the last part, which is approaches to labor relations. International businesses differ markedly in their approaches to international labor relations. The main difference is the degree to which labor relations activities are centralized or decentralized. Historically, most international business have decentralized international labor relations activities to their foreign subsidiaries because labor laws, union power, and the nature of collective bargaining varied so much from country to country. It made sense to decentralize the labor relations function to local managers. The belief was that there was no way central management could effectively handle the complexity of simultaneously managing labor relations in a number of different environments. Although this logic still holds, the trend is toward greater centralized control. This trend reflects international firms' attempts to rationalize their global operations. The general rise in competitive pressure in industry after industry has made it more important for firms to control their costs. Because labor costs account for such a large percentage of total costs, many firms are now using the threat to move production to another country in their negotiations with unions to change work rules and limit wage increases, as Ford did in Europe. Because such a move will involve major new investments, and plant closures, this bargaining tactic requires the input of headquarters management, thus the level of centralized input into labor relations is increasing. In addition, the realization is growing that the way work is organized within a plant can be a major source of competitive advantage. Much of the competitive advantage of Japanese auto workers, for example, has been attributed to the use of self-managing teams, job rotation, cross-training, and the like in their Japanese plants. To replicate their domestic performance in foreign plants, the Japanese firms have tried to replicate their practices. This often brings them into direct conflict with traditional work practices in those countries as sanctioned by the local labor unions. So the Japanese firms have often made their foreign investment contingent on the local union accepting a radical change in work practices. To achieve this, the headquarters of many Japanese firms bargains directly with local unions to get union agreement to changes in work rules before committing to an investment.
This is the analysis result of our group for Gojek Global Human Resource Management. So the first one is Gojek is partnering with talent acquisition business to be an instrumental in-house country's recruitment program to find best talents by helping define staffing needs and enhance the current recruiting plan. It also hiring for culture fit as well as skill with minimal process with the right criteria for their talent. Gojek also provide Go Academy to provide training and guidance through intensive and well-structured programs that infuse the culture of what it is like to work in a fast-paced and high-growth startup. They also done a 360-degree assessment of the individual to help him understand himself from the eyes of the others down to specialized functional and product-based career development tracks. They also manage the employee retention by ensuring that they have the right people for the right particular stage project. And they adopted a technology-based approach to help record, assess, grow, and appreciate employees. Gojek has systems and tools in place for multiple streams, recruitment, performance, and learning visual development.
So for the first case, what is the way the corporation in Qatar makes an adaptive living for the IAS? The corporation in Qatar makes an adaptive living for the IS is by the mentality, attitude, generous, humble, and they trying to get each other backs. So other than that, they have similar goals so that they work for us as a team. In relationship between Qatar and India, as I've searched before, as our our group searched before, in sectors such as energy, commerce, investment, food processing, healthcare, education, culture, defense, and also security. They discuss ways to deepen the diverse bilateral relationship. Also, India expressed gratitude to Qatar for caring for members of the Indian community during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Now I will explain the case number 2. What type of international accounting standard involved in Qatar, and why does this happen? Qatar use IFRS standards as regulated in their commercial law number 5 of 2002 that requires all listed company to prepare consolidated and separate company financial statement, and it regulated by the Qatar Financial Markets Authority, and they define it as IFRS standards. Why does this happen? Because Qatar is an Islamic country, and by using IFRS standards, it can provide Qatar an appropriate accounting treatment for Islamic finance products transactions, and also make it possible to recognize, measure, and disclose the economic substance of Islamic finance without compromising Sharia or Islamic principle.
So now moving on to number 3, what can international human resource management functions support in staffing and planning? So first, we're going to talk about staffing. In international human resource management, or IHRM, there are 4 approaches to staffing. They are ethnocentric, polycentric, geocentric, and regiocentric. So ethnocentricity means a strong orientation towards the home country. So a company uses the home base for the production of standardized products for the export markets. Decision-making in such an organization is centralized. So in the ethnocentric orientation, the company prefers to bring managers from the home country to head operations in the subsidiary. Key managerial and technical positions are held by parent country nationals, and local employees fill only low-level and supporting jobs. Sony Corporation operations in the US typically follow this approach. Sony Corporation of America is a wholly owned subsidiary of Sony Corporation Japan, which handles local HR issues, but top executives at the organization's operations across the US are Japanese managers from the company's Japanese home office. The second one is the polycentric approach. In a polycentric approach, the host country nationals are hired to staff subsidiary activities. Local managers are hired by following the local practices, and the managers are required to speak and write in the home country's national language. For example, MNCs operating in East Asia and Australia often hire local managers, as hiring expatriates is too expensive. Hiring local managers is advantageous because they are familiar with local cultural needs, involve lower costs in hiring and maintaining, and there is continuity in management as locals stay longer in their respective positions. The third approach is the geocentric approach. In a geocentric approach, MNCs hire people mainly from third country nations where neither subsidiaries or headquarters are located. Recruitment and selection takes place worldwide, whereby the most competent employees can be identified. The suitability of the managers to the requirement of the job outweigh any consideration of any individual country of origin or country of job assignment. The last approach is the regiocentric approach. It reflects the geographic strategy and structure of the multinational like the geocentric approach. It uses a wider pool of managers, but in a limited way. Personnel may move outside their countries, but only within the particular geographic region. Regional managers may not be promoted to headquarter position, but enjoy a degree of regional autonomy in decision making. Now we're going to talk about planning. So in international human resource management, there's something called strategic IHRM. So strategic IHRM focuses on creating and implementing IHRM policies and practices that help achieve an MNC's international strategy. It involves the strategic management of the IHRM function and department itself. In an ideal world, a firm conducting international business will be actively engaged in strategic planning and strategic management process on a global basis. A strategy signals an organization's commitment to specific markets, competitive approaches, and ways of operating.
So for the fourth question of how do you recommend the process of staffing for Qatar Corporation, I recommend that the staffing process that I would recommend is using the geocentric approach, as a geocentric staffing policy seeks the best people for the key jobs throughout the organization, regardless of the nationality. As we saw from the video, 90% of the population in Qatar are not actually Qataris and rather expatriates. So this policy should be the best staffing policy in Qatar. And this policy also has a number of advantages. First, it enables the firm to make the best use of its human resources. And second, and perhaps more important, a geocentric policy enables the firm to build a cadre of international executives who feel at home working in a number of cultures. So creation of such cadre may be a critical first step toward building a strong unifying corporate culture and an informal management network, both of which are required for global standardization and transnational strategies. So that is all for our presentation. Thank you.